Picture this: a warm May evening in Midtown Manhattan. Neon lights reflect off rain. Slick streets. The air is thick with the hum of taxis and chatter. The city is alive, but inside two hotel rooms, just 2 blocks apart, something horrifying has happened. Within 5 short days, 2 women, both respected, both staying at upscale hotels, are brutally murdered with an axe-like weapon. Their hair is cut off after death, and in one case, part of the scalp is removed. Nearly 40 years later, these crimes remain unsolved. Who killed Janet Scott and Ruth Potdevin, and why? Chapter 1. Janet Cetre Scott. The first murder. Janet C. Scott was a 56-year-old management consultant from Riverside, Connecticut. She had a warm smile, a reputation for professionalism, and she loved the vibrancy of New York City. Janet frequently traveled to Manhattan for work and usually stayed at the Bryant Hotel, a midtown property known for its elegant decor and proximity to Bryant Park. On May 10, 1985, Janet checked into the Bryant Hotel for what should have been another routine overnight stay. She dined with colleagues, returned to her room, and was expected to check out the next morning. When she failed to appear for checkout, hotel housekeeping went to her room. What they found was gruesome. Janet lay on her back on the bed, fully clothed. She had been struck repeatedly in the head with a heavy, sharp object later determined to be consistent with a hatchet or small axe. The blows caused catastrophic head trauma. Most disturbing of all, the killer had cut Janet's hair after death, removing most of it. Some reports suggested part of the scalp had also been taken. There were no signs of forced entry. Janet's handbag and credit cards were missing, but the room was otherwise undisturbed. The attack had been precise, almost calm, no overturned furniture, no drawn-out struggle. Whoever killed Janet likely entered quietly, struck fast, and left just as quickly. Chapter 2. Ruth Potdevin, the second murder. 5 days later, on May 15, 1985, the nightmare repeated itself. Just 2 blocks away, at the Dorset Hotel, another upscale midtown property, 67-year-old Ruth Potdevin checked in alone. Ruth was a philanthropist from Far Hills, New Jersey, active in charity work, well-known in social circles, and a woman who loved Manhattan. That night, Ruth was attacked in her hotel room. The crime scene was hauntingly similar to Janet's. Ruth, too, was bludgeoned in the head with a hatchet-like weapon, and once again, her hair had been cut away after death. In Ruth's case, part of the scalp was definitively removed. Her handbag and credit cards were missing. Like Janet, Ruth was found clothed. 2 women, 2 hotels, 5 days apart, both murdered in an almost identical fashion. The press quickly dubbed the killer the hatchet murderer. Chapter 3. The investigation begins. The NYPD assigned homicide detectives from Midtown South to the case. Evidence technicians combed through both crime scenes, collecting fingerprints, hairs, fibers, and any trace evidence that might link the crimes. Detectives also immediately began tracing the missing credit cards. Janet Scott's cards were used shortly after her death at several stores in Times Square. Witnesses remembered a man in his 20s, slim, well-dressed, but slightly disheveled, using the cards to purchase electronics and clothing. Composite sketches were made and distributed to the press. In Ruth Potdevin's case, her cards were used at completely different locations, including a restaurant and a liquor store. Police suspected the same man might have been responsible for both thefts, but they could not conclusively tie the transactions to one individual. This credit card trail was the strongest lead investigators had. For a brief period, it seemed they might get a break. But despite the sketches being printed in newspapers, no one came forward with a name that led to an arrest. Chapter 4. The New York City backdrop. To understand the fear these murders caused, we need to picture New York City in the mid-1980s. Crime rates were near record highs. Times Square was seedy, filled with adult theaters, street hustlers, and open drug dealing. Murders occurred daily. But these were not random street crimes. These murders happened inside supposedly secure hotels, in private rooms, targeting respectable women. That fact shocked the public. Midtown hotels scrambled to reassure guests. Management reminded travelers to use their deadbolts and security chains, and some even increased security patrols in the halls. Chapter 5. The Media Firestorm. New York's tabloids had a field day. Hatchet killer stalks Midtown, screamed one headline. Others speculated about satanic rituals because of the hair removal. Reporters crowded police press briefings, desperate for updates. Police, under pressure, deployed undercover officers to hotels in the area. They feared a third murder might occur. But days turned into weeks, and no similar attacks happened. Chapter 6. Leads that went nowhere. Dozens of potential witnesses were interviewed: hotel staff, bellhops, night clerks. A few reported seeing a suspicious man loitering in the hallways around the time of the killings. Others remembered nothing out of the ordinary. Fingerprints were recovered from the scenes, but none matched known offenders in police databases at the time. The composite sketches generated tips, but all led to dead ends. The stolen credit card transactions were investigated until the cards stopped being used. Whoever the man was, he vanished. Chapter 7. Theories. Investigators debated several possibilities. A single ritualistic killer. The near-identical nature of the crime suggested one perpetrator. The haircutting might have been part of a ritual, or perhaps a psychological compulsion, or a way of taking a trophy. Robbery turned homicide. Perhaps the killer entered to steal valuables, panicked when confronted, and killed. But the post-mortem hair removal still seemed bizarre for a simple theft. Transient predator. Some detectives theorized that the killer was a drifter who left the city after the murders, explaining why no further similar killings occurred. Copycat or two killers. A minority suggested two separate killers, but the timing and method made this seem unlikely. Chapter 8. Hotel industry fallout. Midtown hotels saw cancellations from nervous guests. Industry leaders responded by quietly upgrading locks, installing security cameras, and improving hallway lighting. These murders were part of the push that changed hotel safety standards nationwide. Chapter 9. The case grows cold. By late summer 1985, leads had dried up. No further attacks were linked to the hatchet killer. Police reassigned many of the detectives to fresh cases, though the murders technically remained open. Chapter 10. The families of Janet Scott and Ruth Potdevin were devastated. Janet's colleagues described her as brilliant, kind, and deeply missed. Ruth's friends in New Jersey held memorials and charity events in her honor. But grief turned to frustration as months passed without an arrest. Chapter 11. Forensics then versus now. In 1985, DNA profiling was in its infancy. Police could not test for the kind of trace evidence that might be routine today. If any of that evidence still exists, modern techniques could generate a genetic profile and even identify relatives of the killer through genealogy databases. Chapter 12. The credit card user. Whoever used Janet's credit cards was seen clearly enough to produce a composite sketch, yet no match was ever made. Was he the killer, or just someone who bought the cards secondhand on the street? Detectives could never prove the connection. Chapter 13. Other hatchet crimes. Around the same time, hatchet-style murders were reported elsewhere in the United States, in Chicago, Miami, and Los Angeles. None were definitively linked, but some detectives wondered whether the same offender might have been traveling. Chapter 14. Criminal profile. FBI profilers who later reviewed the case suggested the killer was organized, likely male, comfortable moving through upscale environments without drawing suspicion. The post-mortem hair removal suggested a psychological need, perhaps humiliation, perhaps fetishistic. Chapter 15. Why it stopped. The biggest mystery. Why were there only 2 killings? Serial offenders often escalate. Did the killer die, get arrested for another crime, or leave New York entirely? Or were there more victims that went unrecognized as connected? Chapter 16. Modern cold case potential. Today, cold case detectives might pull old evidence boxes, swab for DNA, run it through CODIS or genetic genealogy. Dozens of cases from the 1980s have been solved this way. This case could be next if the evidence was preserved. Chapter 17. Final reflection. 2 women, 2 hotels, 5 days apart, and a killer who, to this day, has never been caught. This case remains one of New York City's most haunting mysteries, a reminder of a dangerous era and of how justice sometimes waits for science to catch up. If this case sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Crime in the Shadows. Could the killer still be out there, walking the same streets today? Tell us your theories in the comments below. Your perspective might shed new light on this case.